Welcome to this presentation of turn-of-century Magnolia. We'll be looking at Magnolia from the late 1800s into the first couple of decades of the 1900s. Okay, in this image of Magnolia, we're going to start at the very top of the picture along that rocky coast and move our way down through Magnolia and work our way all the way around. Here we are on that rocky coast looking up towards Gloucester Harbor, and this is the area where Hammond Castle is. And if you look off to the right of this image, you start to see a little bit of a reef. Off the coast of Hammond Castle is this reef, which is called Norman's Woe. It was made famous by the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, whose image you see there in the upper left hand. He made this famous in his poem, The Wreck of the Hesperus, in 1842. The irony is he never saw this rock until much later after writing his poem. He based his poem on the blizzard of 1839, when 20 ships and 40 lives were lost during a storm. It was actually the schooner Favorite which sank on Norman's Woe with all hands lost. After the storm, a body of a woman tied to a mast was found on the shore nearby. Now, there was a schooner named Hesperus, and it was seriously damaged during the storm, but that was in Boston Harbor, not here in Gloucester. However, because of the name of the poem, that's how the street got its name. Now, if we turn to our right and look down the coast towards Magnolia, off of Norman's Woe, you would see this view, and as the postcard says, we are at the chasm. Now that's Rafe's Chasm, Rafe being a pronunciation of Ralph at the time. This chasm is about 200 feet long, 10 feet across at its greatest width, and about 60 feet deep. Unfortunately, it is a dangerous spot, and there have been a number of lives lost here, so you do have to visit with care. Another view looking up at the backside of Magnolia Point from the chasm. We'll be visiting a number of these buildings in the view. Okay, this map is from 1919, and you see Magnolia Point, but you also see a little bit further around the area. And the pond that's in the middle, which we now call Westie's Pond, is where ice was harvested to be used at the local hotels. Close up, and you can see Lexington Avenue marked off in green, starting at Norman, going all the way down to the water. Then crossing it is Hesperus Ave. Now, Hesperus Ave does start here, but it continues going up north all the way up the coast past Hammond Castle. Now, we're going to start at the top of Lexington, where it crosses with Norman at that corner. On the corner of Lexington and Norman is the Magnolia Library. Now, in 1886, a corporation was formed to build this library, and they commissioned Charles Cummings to design it. He also designs a few other buildings in Magnolia, which we will be seeing later. The building was completed in 1891, and it was owned by stockholders. It was in 1968 that a new corporation was formed with a board as it currently operates. And we're going to look at it again in the next view. Okay, and this is the view of the library from the Norman Ave side. And we're going to go a little bit to its right now, to the new tea house. Now that building is still standing, as is the library. You can see the library a bit to the left. And the tea house no longer has that covered porch area that we see here to the right. But the main building is still standing and is currently apartments. Okay, back up to the corner of Lexington and Norman at number 2 Lexington Avenue is this big building. It's still there, but it was the North Shore Grill. And the North Shore Grill was opened in 1911, and it's where the Smart Set partied the nights away, and the streets were lined with waiting chauffeurs, as Joe Garland quoted in his book. Here's another view of the North Shore Grill Club. And again, notice the wonderful columns and the pergola or arborway across the front. Again, that arborway. Here we are under that arborway of the pergola, and off to the right, you see that it opens up, and that opens up too. And here you can see the beautiful lawn and the double-layered balcony that overlooks this lawn. Now, this is an earlier picture before the pergola was built, but you can see how beautiful it was. And the postcard labels what happened here in this open area. This was to appease the women. Now, the North Shore Club was a gentleman's club. Women weren't allowed in. So to appease them, the ladies, they offered tea in the rose garden here, as you can see in the next slide. This postcard shows tea in action. This site later does become Del Monte's and other eateries, most recently Dunkin' Donuts, and of course currently Sherry's Corner Cafe. Okay, and now we're heading down a little further, and if you look on the left, you'll see some columns, but they look a little bit different, and that's because it's a different building. And this new building is the Colonnade, which was a series of stores. Now, this street was nicknamed Robbers Row because of the price tag on many of the items in these exclusive shops, some of them being branches from stores from all over the world. Filene's, Jordan's, FAO Schwartz, Tiffany's all had stores on this street, along with some others which we will see. Now, in this postcard on the right, you see a very tall building. That's the new Magnolia Hotel. It was quite large, but it didn't last very long. And so that site does get replaced with a new set of stores, which we will be seeing. And on this postcard, you can see it on the left there, the different type of columns. And here's another view of the Colonial. Now, the Colonial is reported to be the first mall, shopping mall in the country, this whole collection of wonderful stores. And one of those columns is actually still there on the street after one of the fires. A piece of it is still there near J.D. Myers. Now, if you look across the street, Lexington, you can see a little bit of the arcade. Here's another image of it. This is the oldest out of the shops. It was built in 1867. And if you notice, it goes almost all the way down to the library. And parts of it are still in existence today. It's missing its decorative roof features, and the covered passageways have been built out to the street level in some places, but or else outright missing. But it is there. Images of one of the shops that was there. Notice the arches, and this one was built out a little closer. This is called the Trousseau House of America in Magnolia, a French shop. Another shop that's there, and this part of the building is still there. You notice the features on the roof have slightly changed in this 1913 image. Okay, now if you look on this map where the red star is, you can see we've gone down one block from Norman down to Flume. And on the northern side, you can see the Colonnade listed and the Colonial listed. Across the street, of course, is where the arcade was. Now, the site of the Colonial replaced an earlier building, as I mentioned, the new Magnolia. Okay, now on this map, reorient yourself because we've turned 90 degrees. And we're back at that corner of Flume and Lexington, and you can see where the Colonial and the Colonnade were, is where the Magnolia used to be that we saw earlier in the postcard. And here's a picture of it from a little further off. It was very tall, very big, very exclusive. It was built by the Reverend Frank Sprague, or Sprague. Here's another nice view of it. Notice the wonderful porch that wraps around, or piazza, where people could sit and enjoy the view and the nice cool shade. This hotel was later sold and managed by Mr. Gibson for 17 years, and it was very well known for its own house orchestra, the New Magnolia Orchestra. And here's another nice view of it. Okay, this is a little brochure advertising the Magnolia. And here it's advertising its views, its bathing beach, the boating and fishing, its scenery, drives, its health benefits. And then, of course, the hotel itself, its rooms and its restaurants. And you see the proprietor listed, a W.H. Priest. And here are floor plans. And on the left, you see the main level with the dining room and the parlor. You see the piazza, that porch wrapping around with its wonderful views in the parlor. Notice the smoking parlor. And then on the right side, you'll see the floor plans for all the floors above with all the guest rooms. Now, this is a later postcard. You can tell because look what happened to the piazza. Part of the corner there got enclosed, and there is now a lower piazza underneath it. And another view about that same time period with that closed in. It's probably another dining room with views. Here is a picture. Now this is a parade of some sort. I'm guessing it's the 4th of July parade. Interesting that the postmark for this postcard is also in July of another year. Okay, the new Magnolia Hotel didn't last very long, less than 20 years. If you remember, it was built in 1891, but it burnt down in 1908. In 1912, the site was sold to Annie Ryan, who built that Colonial shopping plaza on it. Now, the Colonial burnt down in 1991, the stores that were still there. And then in 2002, the Ocean Terrace condos on that site burnt down. Unfortunately, it's fuzzy, but this is the view that you would have had from the new Magnolia, looking down at Kettle Cove, Magnolia Beach, and you're seeing Coolidge Point across the way there. Now, down in the foreground, in the center, you see a building that has features very similar to the library, and that's because it was designed by the same person, Mr. Cummings, and let's go look at it. It was the Union Chapel. The land was bought in 1884 by the trustees of Magnolia Church, which included Thomas Jefferson Coolidge from Coolidge Point. And it was a committee of ladies who raised the money at a fundraiser held at the Hesper's House Hotel, which we will see soon, to commission Mr. Cummings to design and build this chapel. It served for 40 years as a non-denominational church until it closed. And when it did close, the bell that you can see in the tower there and the round stained glass window were moved to the newly formed Union Congregational Church on Norman. Here's another view, and you can see the bell a little closer and the round stained glass window. Both of them, like I said, were moved. In 1945, the property was purchased and converted into a private home, which is still the case. Okay, so we've just taken a short little detour on Flume. You can see on the red star we're back at the corner of Lexington and Flume. And we're going to head down the next block to where the blue star is. And right above Lexington Ave, you see Oceanside Hotel. It takes up a very big space. Okay, and here we are at the Oceanside. The Star Hotel of Magnolia Point. It was dubbed the largest hotel east of the Mississippi. Here's a postcard of it toward the end of its existence. But this is how it started. It was originally a modest boarding house called the Perkins House that was opened in 1877. 2 years later, in 1879, George Upton bought the boarding house, opened it up a year later as the Oceanside, and continued to build on it, making it much larger. Okay, here's the floor plans of the final size. You can see in the description above that this was sketched from memory by George C. Cruson III. And he is remembering it because it was his father who owned it up until 1946. And it does say it was destroyed by fire in 1958. But you can see it had a theater, a large dining room, of course the kitchen area, a music room, the big lobby, bar and lounge, and a soda fountain gift shop. And here's the view of the side. What you're seeing is the portico or the porte cochere where people would drive under to arrive and they'd go up the stairs to get in. Now the left part of this building that you see here, that was the original Perkins house that we saw earlier, slightly modified. That original Perkins house is hiding behind the tree in this image, but if you look to the left, up Lexington, you can see the new Magnolia in the background, and then going to the right, which is down Hesperus, you see the rest of the Oceanside Hotel with the porte cochere. And here is that porte cochere with the sign Oceanside that they would drive in. Here's another view up a little closer of it. And here's a view we've gone past and we're looking back under it, and you can see a vehicle is stopped off to drop people off. If you went further down Lexington and looked back, this is what the corner looked like. And again, what the part we're seeing is part of the original Perkins house end. Now, if you had gone up to the top and looked down Hesperus towards the coast, this would have been the view looking down on the gardens and the tennis courts. Again, that same view, taken another time. Beautiful gardens, one less tennis court in this point. And here's part of that view. Now notice the roof line and the tower at the far left. Now this was a pretty large hotel, but Mr. Upton kept making it larger. And in fact, in 1913, he absorbed another hotel, which we will be seeing soon. And at the height, had 600 rooms, plus 10 cottages, could house 3,000 guests. And some of his guests were quite famous: Rose Kennedy, J.P. Morgan, John Philip Sousa, Henry Ford, Cecil Rhodes, General MacArthur. In this image, you can see the tennis courts, and you can see the tower at the end. Notice the open porches up there. Now that's going to change. You'll notice in this one, that tower's missing. In fact, if you look carefully, you'll notice there's another floor up on the top. Kept adding more rooms. Here again, you can see our two tennis courts. Now the two buildings you see on the right, those are dormitories for staff and for visiting servants that came with their the guests. Again, more views. And now notice that some of the open porches have been enclosed at this point. And again, some of those enclosed porches that used to be open. And you can see the dormitories. And now we have a pool. So one of the tennis courts made way for a pool. That pool actually outlasted the hotel. And if we had gone further down the road and looking back, you can see the beautiful gardens that were maintained. And off to the left, you see a little bit of one of the cottages that the hotel used to rent out. In fact, in this picture, you can see quite a few of the cottages owned by the Oceanside that were rented out. And again, more of those views on Cobblestone Beach. Wonderful image of nighttime, as is the next one as well. Again, nighttime view of the hotel complex. Now, we've been looking mostly at postcards, and sometimes postcards are printed by people who have no idea of what they're printing about. Now, if you look carefully at this postcard, you can see where Shore Road has been labeled and marked, but doesn't look quite right. And that's because this was printed backwards. The negative was flipped, and the people who printed didn't know any better. Flipped, and you can see that is the correct view. So a fun little thing to note when you're looking at old vintage postcards, that sometimes they may be a flipped image. And here is the same negative. Another printer got it right. Okay, that's the cobblestone beach looking down the coast, and you can see the big lawn for the next summer cottage that's further down there. And then turning around, and this is the view going up Shore Road. Now, a number of the buildings that you see here on the left are still there, but the two on the furthest left are no longer there. And then you can see even further on. And again, now in this particular image, the two buildings in the middle are actually still there. It's the one on the right that is no longer there, but notice the little round gazebo. That formation is still there, although the gazebo is not on top anymore. This aerial shows that same area, and you can see that that big house with the gazebo is no longer there anymore, and you can see the Shorecliff nursing home complex. Until only a few years ago, this was the Shorecliff Manor, the old nursing home run by the Baptist Hospital. And another view of the former Shorecliff Manor. The stone walls and gate are still there, but now it's very fancy townhouses. Okay, now we're going to backtrack on shore and go back up Hesperus, up to where the Red Star is. We're going to cross over Lexington to the other side. Okay, the complex at that Red Star was the Hesperus House. That was the first hotel built here in Magnolia. It was opened in 1877 by Daniel Fuller, and Fuller Ave is named after him, and it was in between Lexington and Fuller on Hesperus Ave, hence the name Hesperus. In 1913, it was purchased by the Oceanside to add more rooms to that complex, and was considered the annex of the Oceanside. It unfortunately burned down in the 1950s and was demolished. Over time, the Hesperus House was added to, and you can see distinct different sections as that grew over that time. Another image looking down Hesperus Ave. In the background on the right, you can see the top of the Oceanside Hotel. Okay, the structure in the foreground of this postcard is actually the laundry yard. This is where they would hang out the laundry from the hotel to dry, and being enclosed in these stone walls could help shield it from view from the street. If you kept going down Hesperus and crossed over Fuller, this would have been the next building you would have seen, and it is the Green Gables Club. It was actually a single ladies' inn for any unmarried single ladies who wanted to stay in Magnolia. This was a good place for them to be. And if you were to dine inside the Green Gables, this is the dining room that you would have been eating in. This illustration from 1887 shows you the Green Gables Inn where the Red Star is, and then if you went to the right, continuing up Hesperus Ave, you see the Hesperus House, and then keep going, and you see an early version of the Oceanside before it got as big as its final version. Also notice in front of the Hesperus House, it was clear view all the way down to the water. There was nothing on the block at this point. That changes very quickly. Okay, on this map in 1919, if you notice where the Red Star is at the junction of Lexington and Hesperus, and you look at that block that we just looked at before that was completely empty, notice there is streets going in there. Notice how many buildings have since been built. A number of these were private family cottages. Some were owned by the ocean side, and there was also another hotel on that block. And we're going to be going down and looking at this bottom end of Lexington Ave to the water. This is the view from the ocean side at what had been that empty block. And you can see all the wonderful little cottages that were in there. And many of them, almost all of them in this picture, are still there. The same view again. It's actually a little bit more crowded now at this point. This is almost the exact same view, except we've slightly turned to the left so that we can see down Lexington Ave. Unfortunately, a number of the original houses on this lower section of Lexington Ave are missing, but some of them are still there. Take note of the one in the foreground right up front. If you notice the handwriting on this postcard, this is our cottage. Some lucky person was staying in the cottage at the time they sent this. Unfortunately, it's no longer there. But if you go to the right and you see the little mansard roof building, that one is still there. Across the street from those two cottages, you would have seen this. Here on this postcard, it's labeled the Kettle Rock Inn. Kettle Rock Inn as viewed from Lexington Ave. And this postcard from when it was called the Aborn. This was built in 1899 by Mr. Aborn, and it was run by his son-in-law, Henry Haskell. It does get incorrectly identified on some other postcards. As you can see on this one, it was never called the Avon. The Aborn or Kettle Cove or Kettle Rock Inn had a beautiful view and gardens looking down to the water. Same negative, but labeled with the other name of the hotel, Aborn Inn Cottages, which was its earlier name. And again, from Shore Road, you can see it, and it's labeled the Avon now. But according to the people who I've talked to, it never was officially called the Avon. That is a misprint. Okay, back on this illustration of 1887, again, you see this empty block where the Aborn was. And where the red star is basically across the street from where the Aborn is. And you see a number of houses on that side of the street. And the one closest to the red star is one we're going to look at a little bit more carefully. And I want you to look north above it. You'll see a blue star because the building gets moved to that new location where the blue star is. Okay, that was the house of Charles C. Goodwin at the bottom of Lexington Ave, closest to the water. Stately house. Notice the wonderful tower, the mansard roof on the top, and its wraparound porch. Notice particularly underneath the porch, the wonderful arches. I want you to notice that because this house got picked up and moved in the 1880s, and it got moved to Flume Ave. And here it is, but it's missing its tower. It's also missing its mansard roof. But you'll notice the wraparound porch is still there and the wonderful arches on the basement level. Okay, at the bottom of Lexington Ave, if you turned left and looked at the buildings along Shore Road, this might look a little bit familiar because most of the buildings in this picture are still there with the exception of the biggest one on the left. That one is not. An earlier view, and now you can see better that building that is missing. There are two houses now in that spot. Same view again, this time look on the right at the two buildings. The one in the foreground is still there, and the one in the background has been replaced since this image. Okay, and in this image you can see that second building in the back on the right is indeed a different building now. And these next two slides show those same two houses, but from the water side. And again. Okay, we're going to turn around and follow Shore Road around towards the beach. And I want you to look at the area in between the two red stars and compare it with a fairly modern day image. Although a bit fuzzy, you can see how that area has been very much filled in. And in this view, you can see Shore Road and how much it has been built in along the point, in fact, the whole point. And you can see Shore Road along the edge there. Now, if you go to the left and turn and go towards the beach, we have now turned onto what used to be a different street. It's now Shore Road, but it used to be part of Magnolia Ave, but it was also referred to as Lobster Lane. And here we are on Lobster Lane, officially Magnolia Ave at the time, and the buildings you're seeing along the left are the fisherman's shack, mostly lobstermen, which is why it was called Lobster Lane. Okay, we've moved up a little further along Lobster Lane, as you see this postcard labeled, and we're at the bottom of Hesperus. And you'll notice the cute little buildings there on the right. Here we are at the corner of Lobster Lane and Hesperus, and a closer view of those buildings. Now the second one in is the one we're going to look at next. And as you can see labeled on this postcard, this was the Women's Club. Now this was built in 1906 and it was overseen by George Upton, the owner of Oceanside. And this was specifically for women staff of the hotel, and also servants and staff of the guests. They were not welcome inside the hotel with the guests, so they had their own place to go hang out where they could have tea, play cards, and enjoy each other's company. Another postcard showing the Women's Club. Now the men did have their own club too. It was a little further down on Magnolia Ave. Those who know Magnolia today will recognize this building. This was the men's version of the same club. Again, this is for hotel staff and the servants of the guests, and this was a place for them to go hang out. This was built in 1909, and it was recreational facilities for the male employees, and it offered billiard and pool, bowling, dances, had a restaurant, card playing, and a reading room. And another postcard showing the men's club. And as you can see, it really hasn't changed much today. Okay, backtracking up Lobster Lane where we left off at the women's club, which you can just see on the left with little bits of awning. We're looking down what we now know as Shore Road. Same view from further back, closer to the beach. Same view again, but probably earlier, because if you look carefully, the women's club is missing on the left. And then on the right, you will notice a damaged pier. That seems to happen repeatedly. Okay, we've reached the end of Lobster Lane and made our way onto the beach, and you can see the backside of those fishing huts that were on Lobster Lane. And going further down the beach and looking back at Lobster Lane. Okay, about halfway down the beach, you would have seen this building with the pillars on the left. Oceanside Bathing Beach and Casino. This was belonged to the Oceanside Hotel, and it was their bathing facilities. An early view from in front of that casino, looking back at the point, and in the center, the tallest building is the Magnolia. And then if you go further down, you can see the tower with the flag that belonged to the Oceanside Hotel. And again, another view on the beach with the Magnolia sticking right up on the hill, and then off to the right, you can see the tops of the Oceanside. And yes, they brought their horses and carriages down on the beach, and you can see a bit of an early form of the casino that belonged to the Oceanside. And why did they have that building they called the casino facilities? They had sports along the beach. Here we have some polo happening. You can make out a few of their mallets there, and you can see people sitting in those stands up there. And if you look today at the beach at this aerial photo, you can picture that, the grandstand being about smack in the middle of that beach. Almost in the center, you can see the white columns from the Oceanside bathing pavilion, and next to it to the right, you can just make out the roof of where the grandstands were. And then if you go further to the right and look up on the hill, you see a building on the crest. And that building up on top of the hill was the old Blenman Inn, technically in Manchester, but its address was Magnolia. It was also called the Crescent Beach House. It was opened in 1872, lasted until 1891. It could accommodate 125 boarders. It had a billiard room, stables, bathhouses on the beach. It then became the Blenman Hotel for the next 18 years until it burned down in 1892. The property was then purchased by William Coolidge, a relative of T.J. Coolidge, and he built his English manor on the site, which many remember becoming Oakwood Nursing Home. The stereoscope, as labeled, is a view from the Crescent Beach House in Magnolia, or the old, before it became the Blenman Hotel. And today on that site is a collection of new luxury homes. And this postcard shows very clearly the bathing house for the Oceanside, along with the Bath and Tennis Club a little further on. And again, basically the same view, the Oceanside Hotel bathhouse, the white building on the right, and then the dead center, the Bath and Tennis Club in the center. And just a brief word about what we now know as the Bath and Tennis Club was originally the North Shore swimming pool. And another view of the North Shore Swimming Pool Club. Now, at the far end of the beach is Coolidge Point, at one time completely owned by Thomas Jefferson Coolidge, hence the name, where he built a number of homes for his family and sold off lots for other friends. And this is their view back at Magnolia. Okay, we're going to leave the beach and make our way to the junction of where Fuller and Magnolia Ave and Norman, Raymond all meet. We know it as Magnolia Square, but it is officially called Cole Square, named after the first man from Gloucester who was killed in World War II. And this image of Magnolia Square is looking down Raymond. We're actually standing in Norman and looking straight down, and you can see, yep, there is still a light pole in the center of the intersection. Not as big of a planter as we now have, and you can notice the buildings on either side. Now, the mansard roof building on the left is missing. That is now where the variety store is, but the building on the right is still there. Here's a side view of that building. Now it has the dentist office in it, but it was originally a restaurant. And you look further down, you see that the next building, the grayish one, that stands very tall, that is missing today. And that missing tall gray building was Davis's Garage and Storage. Now, it originally started as a stable where the horses and carriages could be rented or boarding, but it was converted to auto service once cars started arriving and we didn't have horses around anymore. It is still the location of an auto repair shop, just that it's not this building anymore. Okay, this building until recently was around for quite a long time. It's built in the 1880s. It later became a post office and a grocery store run under the Lysette family. Originally, their store was a little bit further down the road on Magnolia, and you still see their building labeled the Lysette building. In 1925, it became Doc Oliver Vieira's drugstore, and many people remember it that way with the ice cream counter inside. It was in 1987 that became the House of Pizza until it burnt down in 2014, and we very much miss this building. Another view, Magnolia Square, and one of our favorite buildings. Notice the big store window that since disappeared long before most of us remember. And this is what it looked like when it was the drugstore inside. Very different than when it became the pizza shop. Now, if you go up Norman Ave just one building past the old House of Pizza, you'll see the Union Congregational Church. It was formed in 1887, but they didn't start their building until 1893. And this building was designed by Cummings, who did the other buildings. It was finally completed in 1899. And when the old Union Chapel closed down, it did receive the bell, which is in that little tower to the right, and the beautiful round stained glass window, which is currently visible from Magnolia Square. And that they received that in 1924. Okay, and if we look at this map, you can see where the Magnolia Square was, where Fuller and Magnolia Ave and Raymond and Norman all meet. And where the red star is, we've gone one building up, and you can see where the Union Congregational Church is. And then directly across the street is the little cottage that we'll look at next. Now, if it wasn't for this postcard, I never would have known that the little cottage across the street from the Union Congregational Church used to be the Bradford Studio of Arts and Crafts. This is a wonderful aerial showing Magnolia Square, and if you look back towards the top, you can see the Oceanside Hotel is still there. Go to the right, you see the back side of the Hesperus House, since they both were all down by the end of the 1950s. The latest that this picture can be is the early 1950s.